welcome back to the Core Report. This past week, we saw Big T calling his shot in the Discord before shipping over 150K in PGA.
You don't know what you're missing if you're not in our premium Discord. Big T literally handed the winners to our subscribers before lock, giving away his strategy of mixing specific early start golfers into his player pool. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to use the promo code RPSHeater25 to knock 25% off your first payment on monthly or weekly subscriptions, not including Sabersim.
Our DFS side wasn't the only one to crush this weekend. Keg and Coop were on fire with NASCAR betting winners yet again, clearing over 11 units on Keg's live betting show.
Keg streams over 40 hours weekly of live premium betting content and is regularly picking winners with the bets team. For only $40 a month, you can access the Kegcast and start crushing responsibly too. You will also want to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get Keg, Coop, and JJ's early thoughts on the NASCAR DFS and betting slate weekly every Sunday before lock. Our viewers crush. Just ask Pinto Got Flow, who shipped 14K after using Big T's winners from the 4th of July MLB show. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and set your alerts so you don't miss out.
As always, congrats to our premium members on some big hits recently.
Landa has been on a heater, hitting for 2K and 3K in back-to-back slates. Rookie B making cash, shipped over 6,500 in esports. King D3 hit for over 10K in MLB this weekend. B-Dozer shipped 50K in PGA on DraftKings.
And shout out to our guy AP for hitting 10K in tennis this weekend. As a reminder, all sports are included in our low monthly subscription. That is all for this week. We will see you next time.
What is going on, everyone? AP over here at Run Pure Sports, bringing to you our Sabersim show with my guy Jordan. Jordan, it's been a while, man. It's been a while since we've done office hours. I was being lazy on vacation last week. The Goat Man Gone filled in though, did an excellent job talking MME strategy. We're gonna switch it up a little bit today, so let's bring you in. How's it going, man? First off, is there anything new to talk about with Sabersim right now?
Yeah, man, it's going good. It's good to be back on here. Mangone and I did a lot of MME kind of stuff last week. Did some multi-entry builds, built 150, did a lot of work editing projections and things like that. Had a pretty good show, but wanted to come on here today and maybe focus a little bit more on the other side of the coin with the single entry, the 3-max stuff, particularly because I think, at times Sabersim gets the reputation of being for multi-entry people, right? If you're playing 50, if you're playing 150 lineups, if you're playing 20 lineups, then you use the optimizer, then you use the simulations. And I think that's a little bit of a mistake. I think there's a lot of value you can get out of the single entry stuff, the 3-max stuff. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to just like walk through some of the cool ways I think you can use Sabersim for baseball when you're just building like 1 to 5 lineups, whether you're playing that in a single entry, whether you're playing that in the big tournament, whatever you're doing here. So in terms of new stuff, there are a couple things that have gone live here that I would say are a little bit more behind the scenes. So I'll just touch on that real quick because it makes your lineups a little bit better, even if you really don't know what's going on here. So the first one is we changed the way our correlation calculation works when you actually build lineups. How it works now. So obviously, if we look at one of these guys, I'll just pull somebody up here real quick. We'll pull Aaron Judge up, right? And he's got big correlations to all of the other guys in the Yankees order. Obviously, when Judge does well, everybody gets more opportunities to hit. You're getting RBIs, guys are scoring runs. That's all great. We changed the correlation slider and the way we calculate correlation to calculate now what we call upside correlation. So these numbers are averages. This is basically like how well does Judge correlate with LeMahieu on average? What the correlation slider now actually does is it actually isolates the upside outcomes for a particular player and looks how correlated those players are on those outcomes, right? Because that's what we really want when we're trying to build a lineup. When we're building the Yankees stack, we're not building the Yankees stack for the situation where they score like 4 or 5 runs and everybody kind of does average. we're looking for like what happened last night, right? They scored 16 runs or however many runs, then how correlated are all these guys to each other? So you won't really like notice that particular change in terms of seeing a new button or a new feature or anything on the site. But that is now working behind the scenes here. And it should be building a lot better stacks and identifying those upside correlations a lot better. So for baseball, hitters are correlated with one another. We want to stack. People know that. I think you're still going to get value out of it for baseball. I think where I'm really excited to see this is football, actually. So looking forward to that, where correlations are a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we've got like QB wide receiver correlations, but then like two same team wide receivers are actually maybe a little bit negatively correlated to one another because only one can catch the touchdown on any given play. So sports where correlations are a little bit more complicated, I think that's really going to shine, really going to help out. So just wanted to mention that that actually came out a couple weeks ago. Haven't had a really good opportunity to talk about it here on one of those shows, but that's a big change. And I think it makes people's lineups quite a bit better.
Yeah, that's very interesting and good to know. One other change I believe you were talking about was a performance enhancement coming shortly. So, I mean, obviously not anything that's going to impact like the user interface there, but yeah, that's something that we all over here at Run Pure Sports, members included, absolutely love to see, just because, the product, by itself is fantastic. And so anytime, we can get a beefed up performance and everything, that's always a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. That's what we're working on right now. So hoping to get that out here pretty soon. We're working on, getting through the last round of our testing. We want to make sure we don't break anything sending that out. So that would be another thing. Yeah, very much behind the scenes. Won't really notice anything, new features in the app or anything like that. But when you're building lineups, researching the slate, pulling Sabersim up, everything should be way faster. So really excited about that as well.
Awesome. Well, if you're watching this show and if you're in chat, feel free to drop some questions, but also hit that like button. It helps us out a lot. If you're not subscribed, make sure you get subscribed to the Run Pure channel, that red button on the bottom right-hand corner. We would appreciate it. So Jordan, we're talking behind the scenes. And what we're going to talk about today is not necessarily like if you're a 3-max player, if you're a single entry player, how to use this tool. Now, I for baseball primarily used it for multi-entry entry formats, 50 lineups, 75, 150. NBA though, when I build my core, when I try to figure out what my main lineup is going to be for NBA, I'm a 3 to 5 lineup player. Mm-hmm. I use this all the time, and so I'm actually excited to go through this with you because I haven't been using it for MLB when I've been, trying to define that one lineup that I want to play. I typically will find that lineup, and then I'll use this to multi-enter. So let's kick it back over to you and kind of start this process. And then I can give kind of my feedback, because I should be using this to build, like, even if I'm building one lineup, or at least to like narrow things down from a stacking perspective. So let me flip it back over to you and you can get us started.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think one of the big advantages of using a tool like Sabersim for these contests is you can build a ton of, like, over 1,000 good viable lineups for the contest that you're targeting really quickly. And that these lineups are run through our simulations. They're built with our simulations just the same way they would be for multi-entry kind of stuff. But you get the opportunity to kind of look at this huge, big spread of lineups and then hand pick and kind of filter down until you find the lineup you like. And I think kind of the difference here really is, instead of feeling like you're hand building the lineup from scratch, going in, selecting every individual player, if you have a few things you want to do on that particular slate with your lineups, you can put that in and then let Sabersim kind of, using our simulations, figure out what the best way to build the rest of the lineup is. So I'll kind of talk about just like what I would actually do here if I was trying to do this. So first thing, you build lineups, and then let us know what kind of contest that you're building lineups for. So you can see we have single entry here. We support those kinds of contests here. Maybe you're playing, maybe it's a 5,000 person single entry contest, right? You'll see the settings, the sliders here change based on that selection, right? We have We have an understanding that based on our back testing here, as the contest gets a little bit smaller, smaller fields, smaller entry limit, right? We don't need to worry about ownership as much. We don't need as much variance in there. We can build kind of different types of lineups. And then this is what I was talking about before, right? We're not just going to build you one lineup, send you on your way. We're going to build 500. And it only takes like a few seconds to do this build here and get an opportunity to see on this particular slate for this particular contest, what do 500 viable, potentially profitable lineups look like for this particular slate? So I'll let this build here for a second, and then we'll kind of talk about, what we can do from here to narrow it down. But I think, right off the bat, just a huge advantage of this, you might be playing a 500 person contest, right? So just being able to build 500 lineups quickly and see what these look like, it's just a huge advantage over trying to pick every single individual player for yourself here.
Yeah, no, I like that. And, anyone out there that's watching this, if you're familiar with our shows that we've done in the past, Jordan and I, we have slightly different styles, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. My style is anytime I'm going into this building process, I know what pitchers are in my pool. I know what starting pitchers I'm going to run. And so one thing I will probably do, and I know you like to do more manualization and changes on that step 3, which is awesome too. But one thing I would do is start by narrowing down my pitching options. Like I might even just go through that same process we did for, playing 150 max or 75. Yeah. Might use that same process to at least get an idea of what some of those high upside, properly stacked lineups look like that I would want to put, in a 3 max or even a single entry type of contest.
Yeah, absolutely. Here. So I'll kind of show you what I'm looking at here. And we can definitely go back and limit the pitching pool and build this again here. And actually, I think that's like one of the best ways to use Sabersim. So what I'll typically end up doing here is you got 500 lineups. They're all built for a single entry contest, maybe between 1,000 and 10,000 lineups in it, right? And it'll show you all the different ways that Sabersim thinks is kind of the right way to play this contest. So you said you want to limit your pitching pool. Have you looked at the slate at all? Do you know who maybe you might be targeting if you were playing 1 to 3 lineups or something like that tonight?
Yeah. So, on tonight's slate, we got some big arms. We got Garrett Cole, but he's in a tougher matchup. But what that's going to do is going to lower ownership. So I'm always going to be interested in Cole on any slate and any matchup. And Boston hasn't, they've been kind of hit or miss at times. So he's going to be someone I look at. I'm going to be looking at Dylan Cease, obviously a high strikeout pitcher in a phenomenal matchup. And then, honestly, I'm Joe Musgrove. I've always been a Joe Musgrove guy as well. I believe, a decent park there. Tough matchup though. Actually, the Giants have been pretty terrible. I know that because I stacked them the other night. Yeah, it was painful. But I'm gonna keep. Whenever we have these top arms or high strikeout guys on the slate, I'm going to keep my pool somewhat narrow. I do think what I would do is, and I don't have my pitching pool fully defined yet. I do think I would want to keep in at least one cheap guy just to see whatever my favorite cheap guy is. Maybe tonight it is, let me just give a quick look. Maybe we go with, I guess Spencer Strider isn't that cheap. Maybe Mike Minor just due to the lineup or the matchup. I don't know if I would like him that much. But we could also pick whatever, maybe Saber has as the best value looking at a cheap option as well.
Yeah. So I think one thing you could do here. So we've got this build. So first name you mentioned was Garrett Cole, right? And one thing that we can do, I think is pretty cool, is you can filter and use this magnifying glass and just say, show me all the lineups in this pool that we built that have Garrett Cole. And it's 154 lineups of this pool of 500. And then you can see the breakdown here from all the other pitchers that end up in there. And maybe you end up deciding, hey, I want to use Cole and Dylan Cease, right? Those are my guys. Then what we can do, we can filter by both of these guys, and we'll just start looking at only the lineups that have these two particular pitchers here. And one thing I showed Mangone this last week, and he thought this was pretty cool. We can actually hide this exposure table and actually just go ahead and start looking at some lineups here and seeing, how are these guys paired together? And this is kind of what I mean about hand picking instead of hand building. Maybe you say, I watch the Run Pure shows, I'm researching the slate. I know for a fact in my lineup, in my single bullet tonight, I'm playing Cole and I'm playing Cease. Well, what are the other options of how teams can get stacked up, right? You see, I mean, we're seeing Yankees, we're seeing some Pirates, some probably lower owned Pirate stacks here tonight. It seems like the Rockies aren't going to be super popular either here tonight. That looks like a little bit of a lower owned stack, and you can kind of start seeing how this is going to come together, right? Another thing you can do, right? And this is, I think, kind of what AP was talking about here before, is if you've decided on those pitchers, or maybe you know that you've got kind of a set of pitchers that you want to use. So maybe it's Cease, Cole, Musgrove, and Strider, right? You know that no matter what, you're playing 2-3 lineups, but all your lineups are only going to use those 4 pitchers. Come back here, come back to the pre-build process, eliminate all the other pitchers from your pool except for those 4 guys. And then we do it again, right? This time, so we're kind of iterating here. So now, instead of having 57 lineups that have Cole and Cease, we're going to have another 500 that all have just the pitchers we want here. And now maybe we can come over here and look at our stacks, right? Start looking at what kind of stacks we want. And I think you can have this kind of, you don't even need to build 500 lineups every time if you don't want to, but you can kind of iterate this build over time until you start arriving at that final lineup that you want to play.
I like that a lot. I mean, one thing, so, going back to what I was saying, building single entry and 3 max, I've traditionally been a hand builder for those. And I think a lot of people are. One problem that I think I at times run into is I get tunnel vision. I get tunnel vision on the same stack in a lineup, whether it's like the Yankees, whether it's, I mean, it's usually not the Pirates, to be honest, but, the Astros or any of these awesome teams that or high upside teams that we're looking at, it's always the same stack. That's not necessarily unique all the time. And I think what that screen does, where you can look at all the builds at the same time, what it does is it eliminates that. It helps you look at multiple ways to stack up a game. So that's an excellent feature alone, right there. I think maybe the new issue then would be trying to figure out what 3 lineups that you would want to throw, into your 3 max entries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the cool ways you can do this here, again, we'll hide this exposure table. We'll pull these lineups here again. One of the ways that I've liked to do this before is to just start looking at these, and I'll just I'll check mark in every lineup that I think, oh, that looks pretty good, right? Like maybe I want to play 3 lineups. And what I'll do is I'll just start going through here and I'll pick lineups out here that I think, maybe that's a lineup I want to play, right? Maybe there's something about that here. This is an interesting one, right? So obviously Cole and Cease, we're eating the chalk. We're getting these 2 great arms up top. But then we have this 5-3 stack, Rockies and Marlins, which I think are going to be both pretty unpopular stack. Well, Rockies might be a little chalkier tonight, but definitely not like on the scale of the Yankees or the Diamondbacks or the Braves or any other teams like that. Maybe that's a team I want. Or maybe you're just watching the Run Pure shows before lock, right? And listening to what these guys are talking about, their favorite plays. And maybe somebody mentions, I don't know, do you have a stack that you like here tonight that you think maybe is going to be a little bit interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done my full due diligence yet, but the one thing I will say is whoever the chalky stack is tonight, I'm not going to be on. I mean, we've seen this in baseball. I mean, the Dodgers last night, such a great example. And most of the season, like probably 93% of the time, slates so far, I've done a good job because it's always just a rule that I built in where I'm just trying to fade the most popular spot by default because it's baseball. Like we saw the Dodgers last night in an excellent spot, absolutely excellent spot. But man, the West Coast games there are they can be super frustrating. And the Dodgers were 40% owned across the board. And in baseball, when your best hitters can go 0 for 4, 0 for 5, you just want to embrace the variance at times. So what I'm getting at is I'm not saying like use the initial part of this to eliminate whatever the chalky builds are going to be. Use it to bring in maybe some nice leverage spots, kind of like that build right there. What was that? Did you say, was that the Mets?
No, we had a Marlins stack.
Yeah. I don't even know if the Mets are on the slate tonight. So the other thing that I would do is these West Coast games. Like I was talking to Big T earlier, and he any up to lock show that you go on, he's gonna shout this from the top of the roof. The West Coast games, these parks are just, gosh, they're terrible. I mean, Even the Diamondbacks, the roof's always closed because it's 150
Mm-hmm.
degrees in Arizona right now. Texas, like it's not West Coast, but that's more of a park example where it's just when the roof's closed, it's not a good hitting environment at all. So what I would do is maybe use that team, the team total there to not only like target, increase the total on good parks, but maybe use it to decrease some of these potentially chalkier spots once we've identified them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned the Diamondbacks here. We're getting a ton of Rockies stacks here, so and quite a bit of Diamondbacks as well. So maybe we just come in here and make a quick change to that game as well. Another thing you can do, and this is kind of back to that theme of like iterating here, right? So we did a build, we looked at how things were coming together, then we said, you know what, let's go back, let's adjust our pitching pool, let's put the pitchers that we really want to play in our pitching pool. Another thing you can do once you've identified the stacks that you're interested in playing here is set a stacking rule and iterate on this again. So we come over here this time and we say, we want to play a 5 stack. We know that, but we want to be selective about what teams we're using here. And we want to, maybe eliminate some of those lower total teams completely. Maybe some of those really higher owned teams completely. Right. So we come in here and, I haven't researched the slate perfectly either, but I do think, I think Braves, Dodgers, Yankees is probably the chalk here. So we can take those teams out and maybe take a couple of the other like teams playing on the West Coast as well out. So we're not getting those teams in here as well. And now we start again, right? We get another 500 lineups. This is really the part where I think you can really start to see how powerful this is, because just in a couple seconds, we figure out, okay, we had 500 lineups, but we want them to look this way. So let's build another 500. Boom, done. That easy. Set a stacking rule, and we're going to get another 500 here in a second. We're getting closer and closer to what we want those final lineups to look like here. So I think it's a pretty cool way to use this here. And you could be watching the Run Pure shows and listening along here and, writing down the stacks that these guys are talking about, maybe the teams they want to avoid, those kinds of things here, and dialing in those final lineups.
Yeah, one thing now that I'm just thinking through this and, how I'd use it is I wouldn't so when I first came in and I said, first thing I'm going to do is define my pitching pool and eliminate any pitchers that I just don't have interest in. Well, on a slate where it's like, if you're trying to jam in two high price pitching options, Garrett Cole and Dylan Cease on tonight's slate, you're probably not going to be able to stack up the Braves, at least the power bats on the Braves side. So what I would almost go and do is bring in some of the other pitching options, maybe take an approach like you have. So I would look at this in 2 ways. And it all comes down to how much time you want to take. And this would be like a good part of like the research process. Start off maybe define your pitchers, see what those type of builds look like. Refresh everything, like get the projections, everything back to how you had them, and then start over and keep all of the pitching options there, but just use those team totals to bump up. Because like what I first saw there, I think the Braves weren't hitting very at a high rate, and that's most likely because of the strong pitching options up top, and it's going to be hard to afford those bats. So what I might do is bump up that team slider and then see if it brings in any, contrarian, pitching for, pitching options for that SP2 spot.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I do think, it's interesting the way that the pricing works out here tonight. I think that, that can be true of a lot of these high total, but expensive teams. I think the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Braves, those are all the high total teams on the slate here tonight. But if they're hard to get to, maybe it ends up being that it's the Rockies and the Diamondbacks and the Reds and some of these cheaper teams with like also kind of high totals as well. One thing, so we can bump up the Braves total here, like we just mentioned. I'm going to bump them all the way up to 6 runs. For those that are not super familiar with what this does, so we have tens and thousands of simulations of this particular game on the slate. So before they were at 5.4, right? On average, you take every simulation we have for this game, Braves score 5.4 runs. When we bump this up to 6, what we're doing here instead is we're saying, limit the simulations such that the average run total for the Braves is 6 runs instead, and then use the projections that the players in this game score in that set of simulations instead as their projections. So it's really cool, right? The effect of that is that we get these like correlated changes here across the team. So yeah, let's run another build, see if we get any more Braves here after having bumped them up, or see if we get some more diverse pitchers too.
One little hack I do with the Braves. So this Braves team is just, they've been a printer, and people underutilize the bottom of the order here. And so one thing that I do is I will go in there and I will definitely bump up Michael Harris. Like every projection site out there, I'm talking to us, everyone is under on him. This dude is an absolute stud. I always go in and I bump him up. He's always very low owned. He's always like 2-3% owned. And I do that with all of these guys that are 5 through 9. And what happens when I'm working with Brave stacks is I'll get 1 or 2 from the top of the order, like an Acuna, a Swanson, or a Riley or Olsen, in a good matchup. And then I'll get mixed in, with some of these guys at the bottom too. That works really nice. Now, when I do that, am I messing with the simulations too much, or is that fine to do in certain spots where you like certain hitters, later on in the lineup?
No, I think that's great. And I was actually, Mangone and I were talking last week. I think that's one of my favorite ways to play chalkier teams, but do it in a little bit of a different way, a more unique way, is to just stack up that bottom of the order, or even just include pieces from the bottom of the order in the stack. Michael Harris is a great example of that. Travis d'Arnaud too, when he's in the lineup, I know he's always kind of low, and that's another guy that I just love on the Braves in particular.
So what I'm getting at is we know we like potentially two higher price pitchers tonight. Okay. Whether it's Cole, Strider, Cease for sure. Man, his upside is insane here against the Tigers. Let's just say we like the Braves, but they're hard to get in. Like they're not hitting too often. When we went through that first, our first part of that process where we just define the pitcher, what we can do is on a third cycle, add some, personal bias in there where we bump up the bottom of the order. I guarantee we could get a really interesting Brave stack with 2 high quality pitching options up top. That type of lineup right there is one. It's going to be unique because people don't like playing the bottom of the order. And 2, you're going to have, have the best stack, probably the best stack in the Braves tonight. High exposure to it, maybe even a 5-man with 2 high price pitchers. So I think that type of route, achieves a lot of what we're looking to achieve in a single entry format. Because here's the thing, like single entry 3 max, these are still tournaments. Like sometimes we'll get questions and they're good questions. Like I'm not harping on anyone, but it's like, oh, should I put this in, single entry or, cash, or like sometimes people can confuse single entry, as cash or different from, a large field tournament. It's still a tournament. There's still, in most single entries, unless it's a high stakes, like what Hoop plays, the 3K, I forget what they call that, what the big boys play. That's going to be a little bit different. Okay. That's going to be a little bit different. But if you're playing like a $200 single entry or I think it's $100, like a 109, 10K up top, you have to have a contrarian mindset going into that. You can't just play whatever the chalk lineup is. And I think the process that we've talked about here is a really interesting way to help you develop one.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point. I do think people, sometimes think, one thing I hear all the time is that a single entry lineup is just like a pivot off of your cash game lineup. And especially in a sport like baseball, where correlation is just still so important. I don't know how true that is. You need to, you still need to be building for upside. That 121 battery, I think is the one you're talking about, right? The 10K to first up top. You still need to build, you're beating out, over 1,000 other lineups here to take down first in that contest. And that's where all the money is. That's where all the expected value is in that contest. So you need to really be optimizing and building to take first place. So I was just going to real quickly kind of show, so what we did here, just so we can show how you might use this, right? Maybe you want to see, like, we're going to pump up the Braves a little bit. We're going to bump up the projections at the bottom of the order here. And then what I also did is I set a stacking rule to say, give me 5 stacks of Braves in every lineup. And I'm just going to build another 100 here, right? I just want to, this is almost research. Oh, go ahead.
Can you walk through that just the stacking rule, how you put that like real quickly?
Yeah,
we can do it another time.
No. I mean, it's fine. Let me let the build run here, and then I'll show you how I put that in real quick.
Perfect. Because I think that's a really important feature in there that maybe gets underutilized, maybe just by me, maybe everyone else out there is a lot smarter than me with this, but that's one I actually haven't used too often. I've usually defined my stacks kind of in that step 3, where I'm looking at my team exposure and my stack type exposure. Mm-hmm. So that's where I've adjusted it there when I run 1,500 builds. It might be more optimal to just use the rules up front.
Yeah. And I think the rules can be really useful if you know what you're looking for, right? I know what I want. I know what I'm expecting to see. And this could even just be for research, right? Maybe I stopped the build early. We built 41 lineups instead of the full 100, but maybe you just want to see like, what do lineups where you're jamming in these Brave stacks actually end up looking like? What kind of pitchers do we get to? What are the other supporting stacks that kind of start to show up here? So again, like, let's look at this here. So you can see all of a sudden we do get a little bit of a different pitching style here, right? So the builder still finds a lot of Dylan Cease in there, but we're getting these, kind of cheaper pitchers in decent strikeout upside matchups themselves that are probably going to be super low owned. So you're getting, even this lineup's actually pretty
5-3 right there.
Yeah, 5-3 with two high total teams, and
it's the bottom too that we just talked about. Like that. Here's the thing: no one's going to play it in a single entry. That the 109, whatever the name was, the 10K up top. No one's going to play a lineup like that. That lineup has just as much chance to ship, and it's going to be unique. It's definitely going to be unique. So I love doing that. Just, you have to look at baseball DFS as like a season long type of event. And you got to just understand that, hey, there's a good chance that this lineup, the bottom of the order might not smash, but when it does and you hit, you're going to be unique and you're going to be at the top of leaderboards.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you run this build and you don't like what you see. And you're like, you know what, actually, I don't think this works. I had a strategy that I wanted to try on this slate, and I'm looking at these top 40 lineups and I don't like them. Now you can pivot and you can do something else here. So let's walk through real quick. So I'll show you what I did for that stacking rule. So the stack rules live up in the build settings when you click the new build button under rules and stacking here. And it'll look like this here. I'll just do it from scratch. I'll just start with a brand new build. So it'll look like this when you first pull this up. You can add a rule in here. A couple things you can control. So for most of the time for baseball, I think people are setting rules saying like at least so-and-so many players. On DK, probably a lot of times at least 5 players from the same team. And then you can go through here and choose your particular teams that you want to stack, right? So in this case, it was more of a build that we were doing to look into those Brave stacks. So I said Braves only. Right. But maybe this is actually your final build. And maybe you have a handful of teams that, maybe you want to play. Maybe you're playing Colorado and the Dodgers and Diamondback stacks, right? Maybe so you can select those teams. If you want to get into the nitty gritty and talk about what positions you want to be used or what batting order positions, I like to leave these open personally. I think it makes the build a little bit more flexible. The simulations are kind of helping to make sure that you get the right people in the right batting order spots, the right positions in those particular lineups. But if you want to get that granular, you can do it. And there you go. And that's your stacking rule here. So pretty useful. Again, if the best way I can describe this is if you know what you want, tell us in a stacking rule beforehand so we can build you a better pool of lineups after the fact. Otherwise, the builder understands correlation already. So you don't need to set a stacking rule here like you might need to on other optimizers, but it can be a good tool if you already know what you want ahead of time.
So let's run a full cycle. And while it's loading and running, let's get to Dante Jones's question. If you want to, Jordan.
Yes.
I'll read it out. So Dante in chat, he goes, how can I create my own pool of 150 from the 1,500 I built? For example, I want to be able to hand select my lineups to place in a pool and have those entered versus having Sabres ranking. So it sounds like on the surface, it might be quite the manual process.
It probably is, but if you got the time to do it, that's no problem.
Jordan, I guarantee you this. It's faster than hand building 150. That's the one thing I can guarantee.
It definitely is here. So, all right. So here's what we'll do. So we'll do a 150 build here real quick. So what I would do first obviously tell us what contest you're playing, right? That affects the settings that are ultimately used to build the lineups here. So 150 max, maybe you're playing the flagship, right? The 50K or 100K up top, you're building 150 here. And then we can just go ahead and build lineups here. And this is going to build you a pool of 500, and it's going to sort the top 150 out at the top based on our Saber score, right? Which is a calculation we do to basically quantify the strength of a lineup. How good are the lineups in the pool? So we'll let this build. If you wanted to, I'll show you a couple ways we can do this here in a second. I always get ahead of myself when these builds are running and I start talking too quickly before I can even show it on screen. So we'll give this a second to build, and I'll talk about a couple ways that you can dial in your pool here from this 500 here. But
awesome. Yeah. I mean, the one other thing too, when it does pop back up, show us one more time how to, and I think it's just that little icon that you press, but how you get it so that it shows all the builds in one area that you can just scroll.
Yeah, absolutely here. So give this just a second to load here. Okay. So let's just say, like, hypothetically, you said it, forget it. I don't care about Saber score. Like, I want to literally handpick all 150 out of this pool of 500. What I would actually do is change your number of lineups to 1, which is going to mean that you just have the top overall lineup in your pool here. And then it's this button here, this hide exposures will like push this table aside. Yeah. And then you can click your pool here.
And then you just click them in. All right.
And then you just click them in. And yeah, I mean, 150 is a lot, but you could definitely do it and go this way.
This might be an interesting, so like if you're doing a 20 max, or sometimes I'm playing 50 lineups,
yeah,
and or 75, that might be a little bit easier. But the other thing that you could do is go through there, click all the ones that you like quickly. Yep. And then you could review it to see what your percentages are too, to make sure that they align for what you want. So it's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I think if you're playing, I think it can be pretty cool if you're playing like 10 or 20 lineups even. I think 150 it'd be a lot, but you can definitely do that. Yeah. And then come over here at the end and see, how much. Okay. So I happen to click on 5 Cease lineups. I got 100% exposure to Dylan Cease here. So, I mean, another thing you can do here too, is you can change the way that these are sorted. So maybe you want to come in here and see like, hey, what are the lowest ownership builds in the entire pool I have here? How low can I get that ownership down? You can click this here. And I can't, let's see, these are the highest ones. So you click this and then flip this the other direction here. And it will resort this and basically show you the lowest ownership builds in the entire pool, right? So we have lineups that are as low as 43% owned in this pool here. I don't know if you want to get that crazy, but maybe you want to maybe you want to take a couple shots in your 150 here and get some really low owned builds. I mean, you can see this like Rockies, Mets, fading both Cole and Cease. I don't know if I'd play that lineup, but here's one maybe you want to play a little bit more, right? We get Cole in there, play a really low-owned cheap pitcher in Marco Gonzalez, and you have the rest of the build here. So you can do all kinds of different stuff from this table of lineups and handpick these into your pool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We had one more question that kind of aligns with what we were talking about earlier from Mike Carr. Success with bottom of the lineup, so the baseball lineup, like 7, 8, 9, and wrapping around with 1, 2, 3. Would you just click the order in the lineup, or use or bump player projections?
Yeah. So okay. So good question there. So like first of all, so let's go look at the Yankees here real quick. I think they're a really good example. So because we have these game sims, we'll understand the correlations of these players automatically. So like if we pick on Trevino here, right? Like let's look at who his most common correlations are, right? So he's correlated to the whole Yankees lineup, but look at his biggest correlations, right? We have Kainer Falefa here hitting 8th right in front of him, right? And then the wraparound, LeMahieu, who we expect to hit first, Judge, who we expect to hit second, Hicks, who we expect to hit 7th, right? So his biggest correlations here are to the other players in that spot of the order. So when you build your lineups and you have this high correlation slider already, that's going to be partially taken into account automatically because those correlations are just higher. Now, if you think there's a leverage play at targeting a particular spot of the order for a particular team, like maybe for the Yankees in particular, you like the idea of a 1-2-3 or like a 9, you know what I'm saying, an 8-9 1-2-3 kind of stack, right? Then I think it's fine to go in here and maybe give these guys like a gentle, like I would say like a half point bump would be good for these guys here. And that will kind of incentivize Sabersim when it's building your lineups and building these Yankee stacks to use that part of the order a little bit more. But in terms of correlating your lineup and taking into account batting order correlation, that's automated. That happens automatically here for you. So does that answer the question? Did I understand that correctly here?
Yeah, I think you answered it pretty well. I mean,
Okay.
like the thing about this, and one thing I'm going to start doing more is, and I do incorporate this into my research process quite often, and I have my whole process I go into, and but what I'm getting at is in baseball, there are so many factors that we can use to kind of influence what we want to do. The ballpark is one. The weather is another one. What I love about this is you can use those simple things. And I think if you do this and if you keep it simple, use that to bump up that team score.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence on pitching and stuff. But if you do that, so like tonight, you can use, ballparkpal.com. That's a free resource. Anyone can use it. They have, their park factors. And so obviously Cincinnati is going to be a great park to target tonight. Atlanta gives you a slight bump. The one that, I didn't notice off the bat there, but Chicago. So that's going to be another one that has a nice bump to home runs. You can use these things and take in that information and apply it however you see fit to bump up the run totals in some of these spots. And, and then run it and see what the lineups look like. I mean, maybe you then go to another, whatever resource you use or get. Maybe it's like, it's like the Dodgers last night would have been great. Maybe it's just like, man, I'm not playing a 30 to 40% owned Dodgers team. I'm just going to lower them all. I'm going to put in a 2.5. I know their projected run total was like 6.5 yesterday. I'm going to put it at 3. I know this is a drastic change, or you could just eliminate them entirely, but or maybe just take it down to 4 and see how they see what the lineups look like. I think if people do this more often, you're going to have a lot more success, and it's fun kind of in your process as well. I mean, it makes fantasy a little bit, daily fantasy a little bit, more fun, especially with a sport like baseball where it's high variance. There's always ways to get unique with how you can stack the different lineups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one of my favorite ways to use something like this is to look for situations to get a little bit different. Like you mentioned the White Sox, right? I think that's actually like a really interesting team for tonight, where they kind of seem like they might get a little bit lost. Like they're not one of those top projected teams. They're not one of those elite expensive hitting teams like the Braves or the Yankees or the Dodgers. They're also not the cheap teams. They're not the Rockies. They're not the Diamondbacks. They're not the Reds and Pirates. It seems like a team that's going to get a little bit lost out there. Like who gets to the White Sox here tonight? They've got a pretty good total up against Bo Brisky here. 17% additional chance for home runs.
Jimenez is back, coming off a good night too.
Yeah, and there's a ton of upside here. So
it might be White Sox time tonight for sure. So I wonder why that bump is so significant. This is where I'd cross-reference it off of something else or dive into Discord, because I'm showing 75 degrees and winds gently blowing in. So that's going to be one too. I mean, it's a free resource. I've used it quite a bit, but always cross-check it off of other resources as well, or hop into the Run Pure Sports Discord. People are in there literally 24/7 talking about these things all day.
Well, and I have to say too, also like park factors and weather are going to be captured in our sims automatically. Those are incorporated into our model here. So I don't think that necessarily means like, forget it. It's already taken into account, ignore it. But I would say, just be aware, be a little bit cautious of, I wouldn't want to go and say like, oh, well, Fenway Park is a great hittings park here, and I'm going to go bump up the Yankees to 6 runs. right? Like you're already getting to Yankee stacks. That's not a team that they needed any help in the simulator to get more lineups, but maybe the White Sox are that team, right? Like we're not getting a lot of them. It does seem like there's a little bit of a bump to home runs there for one reason or another, right? And maybe we bump them up here. So
yeah, I'm showing. So like what I look at this is, man, we have, the wind's gently blowing out in Atlanta and it's 90 degrees.
Yep.
Whew. I mean, this Braves team is going to be in a phenomenal spot going against the Liberator, as they call him. I mean, he's gotten absolutely smashed too. So I'm going to be, I mean, this is going to align, quite, it's going to have a high correlation to what I do tonight. That when we bumped up the bottom of the order, Braves and used two nice pitching options, could be a very attractive route tonight, because I'm telling people are going to find a way they want to stack 1 through 5, or they want to at least get Acuna in there. I mean, and rightfully so, or Swanson or Olsen, Riley. But man, don't forget about the bottom. I think that's where the winners are going to come from tonight.
Yep, absolutely. One of my favorite ways to get onto chalky teams and play them a little bit differently. And the Braves have a great bottom of the order too. I mean, Adam Duvall's hitting 7th in our sims. He's averaging 0.21 home runs per game, the highest home run equity on the team, tied with Austin Riley, and probably get a little bit of an ownership discount there just because of the batting order position, right? We can see, this is another thing I like to look at too when we're thinking about the bottom of the order, is I'll look at this 95th percentile, which this is the number that in the simulations, only 5% of the simulations do they score higher than this, right? This is basically kind of their ceiling. Look at the 95th percentile as we move down the order here, right? Like these guys, there's not that big of a difference between the upside of a Michael Harris compared to, somebody batting higher in the order when they score that ceiling outcome here. So I love those kinds of stacks.
Man, it's 90 degrees in Cincinnati too. Oh man. So like on a slate like this, Jordan, I think we'll keep it 3 max. I might use this for the 80K ball 4. So that's a 4 max tournament on DraftKings tonight. I might take into account this process that we talked about, but one thing that I might look at, so I'm going to, if you're out there and you're a member and you use Sabersim, you could do something very similar to this, maybe incorporate things that you like to. I'm going to go through that process. I'm going to look at pitching. I'm going to take it away. I'm going to adjust some settings. One of the last adjustments I'm going to make is just these West Coast teams, like lowering that team total down somewhat significantly. I'm going to get a little aggressive just because, man, they rarely, outside of the Dodgers, they rarely produce winners, it seems like. So, and then I'm going to focus on, I mean, man, it might, and this might be pretty simple and, might be somewhat chalky of a route, but focus on these spots where, I mean, man, at 90 degrees in Atlanta, 88 to 90 in Cincinnati. And then even the Red Sox spots, more so for the Yankees, but that's another nice spot as well. Obviously, Fenway Park, always a great, run environment, big park there. So lots of ways that people can use it from a research standpoint, I think, to dialing in their builds. One other thing too, just since we're on the topic of 3 max single entry, you can use the core plays over at Run Pure Sports too. Maybe. Yep. So like how would you, I'll throw this to you. Let's just say, so on our core plays, we're usually leaving 3 plays off. You don't have to take into account the whole core there, but how could someone, if they're really quickly trying to dial in a core, I mean, would you recommend throwing in maybe 4 or 5 pieces from that core and then letting the builds? Is there a way to lock those guys in and then let the simulator do its thing?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you can come in here and you can lock those guys in, right? So, maybe the core is, maybe it's Cease and you said we already did Cole earlier. So maybe it's Cease and Musgrove, right? The core pitchers. And then maybe it's,
let's do this. Maybe it's Cease, Musgrove. And then let's just say it's Michael Harris. And then let's go, we don't even have, let's just go, 7, 8, 9. And then let's just say Austin Riley. He's been smashing lefties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So leaving 4 spots open there in our lineup.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I just went in and locked those guys in, right? So we have 6 locked players here in this particular case, right? So that I think is the most extreme way of doing it, right? And you can come in here and again, build more lineups, take a look and say, okay, so actually let's say you're building for that, the ball 4 here, right? So
would you decrease the pool size if you're doing this since you're selecting so many, or would you
probably
keep it 500?
I think that's probably a good idea.
What's a good, like 100? Okay.
I typically don't go too much lower than 100. I think that's just a nice number of lineups to look at. I think that's a good approach there. I think this is probably this is like, I'm locked in on the core. I'm playing the core no matter what. Yeah, and I want to see what the best lineups are around it.
This is if someone wants to put the core into like a single entry, you're trying to find one build that you really like, and you're struggling with those fill-ins. You know, you're in Discord and you're asking 3v3 or whatever questions, which we hate answering.
Yeah.
1v1's fine, 2v2 is okay, 3v3 gets very difficult. One way to do that, just go in here and kind of like use your eyes, look at the builds, and then go with your gut on what looks good.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll give this just a second to pop up here, but yeah, you'll get 100 different lineups here with that exact core locked in, and you can see what works. I mean, we actually, so just one, I thought that was a White Sox stack for a second here, but yeah, you can come in here and just start looking and seeing like, what kind of teams did I get along with this here? And maybe you say, you know what, I don't want to play the Rockies. I'm going to X them out. I'm going to zero them out, and you can put 0 in there and see what pops up here next. Another option here instead would be, we come back here and maybe you're looking at the core and you think, I don't want to necessarily play 100% of all these guys. I don't want them in every single lineup, but I want to get some value out of using the core here. What you can instead do is come in here and, think maybe you bump all of these guys up their projections by 10 or 20% or so. So you take Musgrove or Cease, you take Cease and bump him to 26 points. You bump Musgrove up to, say 23.5 or something like that. You come back to this bottom of the order for the Braves and you bump these guys up. And this would be like, I still want to use the core, but I'm not all in. I'm not forcing them into like 100% of my lineups or anything like that. But now we go back and build lineups, and we're going to say like, basically, use these guys maybe a little bit more than you might have. And we'll probably get quite a bit of exposure to them. We don't have 100%. And this would be like maybe a less extreme way of using that core, and seeing what comes out on the other side.
I like that. I mean, the main thing here is using, multiple multiple tools or pieces of information, and then use Sabersim as your final hub to kind of conduct, the builds. If you think of like just like an orchestra, like just think about the composer, you're that person, like, conducting everything and taking all the chaos that's out there and then using Saber to kind of dial it in. I really like that. I'm going to start, cause my process is like pretty, like, I mean, it's somewhat tedious. I like to go kind of game by game, look at different things, look at environments. And I'm old school. I like writing it down. I mean, I use a Word document, so I'm not writing it down, just faster typer. But it takes me, maybe 30 minutes tops to review all of the spots. But it gives me like one little cheat sheet, for myself. And then it's just going into Sabersim and plugging it in. Maybe that cheat sheet for you is the playbook. Maybe it's Big T's player pool that he uses. There's a lot of tools that maybe it's the stack chart, a tool that we have over there. Mangone has his single entry and 3 max piece as well. There's so many tools that you can use. Maybe it's Discord throughout the day. Like people are in there sharing information, spitting back and forth. There are so many ways to take information. But what I'm saying is use Sabersim to bring it all together and to help you finalize and build and fine tune those lineups.
Yep. I absolutely agree. And the way I always like to think about it too is, Sabersim could be your advisor as you're getting ready for the slate, right? You have an idea, maybe it's from one of the shows or from your own research, and then you kick that over to Sabersim and say, hey, show me what 100 lineups using this idea look like. And maybe you like them, maybe you don't, maybe you like a couple of them. And then you go on to the next thing or keep iterating from there. So it can be a really powerful tool. And I mean, we've been talking here for what, an hour, and basically stayed mostly focused on the smaller field stuff here. And you can see there's all of these different ways you can use it to help those smaller field contests out.
Yeah, here's what we do. So I think we could expand on this topic a little bit more, but we have a major next week. I think what we do, Jordan, we're going to bring the show back on Wednesday, and we're gonna talk about the Open Championship. We'll dive into that. We'll keep it tied around PGA. But I think what we do is we pick this back up and continue to dive into it.
Yep.
Maybe I'll do the screen share and I can kind of walk through, a process I've done, or maybe I can try to remember a slate. And because the nice thing about Saber too is I can go back to previous slates and I could walk through builds as well. So we'll figure out we'll figure out something. But I definitely want to get back on this topic because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts from you? I don't think we have any more questions. So any final thoughts from you today or?
No, I think that's it. Every time I do this show, I start getting excited to play the slate coming up that night here. I think this one in particular is going to be a lot of fun to build lineups for. So
I'm with you. I hadn't looked at it like too hard, but obviously when you start diving in, you really want to dive in, and then now incorporating this more. So I've found a few ways where I want to start incorporating it, to dial in some builds. The last thing I will say, like, your build should feel a little bit uncomfortable. I think a lot of like sharp players would agree with me. It shouldn't feel really, really comfortable unless you're playing like 100-man field. If you're playing a field with 5,000 other people, your build should feel a little uncomfortable. Bottom of the order with two high-priced pitchers. It's going to be different. It just is. So, and what I'm getting at is use that last screen, look through the different builds. If the build looks like tasty, as we often say, or like too good to be true, it probably is. Go with the build that feels uncomfortable, doesn't feel as good, feels riskier, and then use good bankroll management. If you do that, that's how you over the course of time finish up top and take down those tournaments. So we'll leave you all with that. Again, if you haven't yet, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. We have our MLB Swing for the Fences show coming up later this afternoon. And then we obviously have, for our members only, our Up to Lock show with MLB. And then the fellas are hopping on tonight to talk about Showdown for round 2 and tomorrow. And another thing that you can use, Sabersim, which I absolutely love. Yes. So again, hit that like button. I'm AP. That's Jordan. Simon, get us out of here.